regarding the Alyeska Highway interchange and one other item. I will just read a couple of quick statements and then we'll dive in. So the Girdwood Board of Supervisors, its committees and subcommittees are subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25, public meetings. Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meeting Standards of Conduct. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:01 and we'll do roll call disclosures. So my name is Mike Edgington, I'm co-chair and land use supervisor.
Guy Wayne, Fire Department Supervisor.
And board members on the phone.
Brianna Sullivan, co-chair, Parks and Recreation, Cemetery Supervisor.
And Amanda.
Amanda Sassy, Public Safety Supervisor.
Thank you. And is Jennifer's not here? Jennifer's not here. Okay.
Jennifer's trying to get it.
There she is. Oh, no. I'll wait a second then until Jennifer. Put her on the spot. There she is. And Jennifer. Are you
Sorry.
there, Jennifer?
Yes.
That's fine.
Just now. Yes.
We just saw you join. Thank you. So we have a quorum. Any disclosures from anyone on the board? Not hearing any, we will move on. I'll entertain a motion to accept tonight's agenda.
Make a motion.
Thank you, Guy. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Brianna. Looking for assent. Hear any objection? Okay, our agenda is accepted. Quick announcements. Public is encouraged to ask questions and provide comment. Please raise your hand either in person or virtually and wait to be acknowledged. To help discussion stay productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than members of the public. Keep your comments focused on the business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. We will be holding the GVSA non-profit recreation grant presentation on October the 5th at 7 p.m. We'll dive straight into the agenda. Item number 1. It's interchange project with DOT and RNL. So I will hand over the presentation. Is Tara, you're doing?
Yeah, awesome.
Presentation, Tara. And the microphone is just on that side if people have difficulty hearing you.
Perfect. Yeah, please let me know if at any point you cannot hear us. Yeah, thank you all so much for allowing us to come and having this special meeting to talk more about the Seward-Alyeska Intersection Improvements Project. Just getting the full screen mode here. Okay. So we brought most of our project team here today. We really want to talk a bit more about the design that we've developed and really answer any questions, address concerns that we've heard over the past few months, as well as any additional feedback or concerns you guys have tonight. So I'm Taryn Olsenyal. I am a planner and public engagement coordinator with R&M. I am joined here with Ryan and Joe, who are our primary engineers on the project. We've got Tim, who's our project manager at R&M, Juan Lee, who is also a public engagement coordinator, and we've got Christina Huber, who is our DOT project manager here in the room. Joining us on the phone, we also have our environmental specialist, Christy McLean, as well as a couple of other DOT staff members. So we are here to hopefully answer as many questions as we possibly can. Just a brief overview about the project, just in case anyone hasn't been following along with us since we started mid of 2020. But this intersection project is really about two things. The first is maintaining the critical infrastructure that is the Seward Highway, making sure that it is up to standards in terms of its function. It continues to function now and well into the future. We're providing adequate and as safe facilities as possible for through traffic, as well as addressing the local traffic. So people coming in and out of Girdwood and making sure that we have a solution that's going to be ideal for both functions of this intersection. We know that there are safety concerns. I'm sure all have experienced a couple of hair-raising moments at one point or another. We're aware that peak traffic volumes are very, very high at certain times of the year. And again, we're really here to address concerns as they exist now and recognizing that with projected population growth and projected traffic volume increases, not only here in Girdwood, but throughout the entire Kenai Peninsula Borough, we're really looking for a long-term solution to this intersection. We're also here because GBOS, as a community entity, has requested that DOT look at solutions for this project. There was a resolution passed back in 2018 requesting we dig into this and try to find a solution to address all the major conflict points that we see at the existing intersection. And so once again, we're here to improve the intersection. We want to work on capacity, improve its operations, and prioritize safety of that intersection above all. Just a little bit of what we've done so far. We started this project back in August of 2020. We've done numerous engagements and alternative development, worked through an alternative development process thus far. We've had meetings with the Girdwood Station mall owners and businesses, had some meetings specific to the old Girdwood town site neighborhood. We've been working with MOA PM&E. We've been talking with Alaska Trucking Association and really trying to get as much information as we can throughout this process. Most recently, we had our open house in August, and that's where July, which is where we revealed our recommended concept level alternative. And so over the last 2.5 years, we've really worked through this kind of 7-step process that we have up on the screen here. And we started with identifying issues and opportunities. So again, we knew that there were safety concerns, but we really wanted to learn more about what other aspects should we be prioritizing through this process. And we heard that from the community. From there, we went through an alternative development process. So we came up with really conceptual, throw all the options on the table. What could this alternative be? And we presented those 11 preliminary concepts in December of 2020. We went through a pretty extensive evaluation process of those 11 alternatives and ended up grouping them kind of into 3 different categories. We had one that just did not address the primary goals of the project. It didn't meet the purpose and needs, so those were eliminated. We had a category where we saw moderate to potentially significant improvements, but wasn't quite maybe checking all of our boxes, didn't score very well compared to the others. And then we had our top 3, which addressed either all of our concerns, met all of our needs, or did so significantly more than the others. And those are those top 3 alternatives we see on the screen. So alternative 7, which was a trumpet design, alternative 9 and 11, which were different diamond type intersections. The trumpet intersection, it was evaluated at the highest. It reduced conflict points the most. We'll talk more about that in detail, but that is the concept that was then modified, and we applied engineering best practices to it. We started actually looking at the physical constraints on the ground and how that's going to change. And so that modified top alternative, so that trumpet intersection, is that recommended concept level alternative that we presented this summer and what we're here to talk about today. So this is our concept level recommended alternative. There has been one slight modification since we presented this to the community in July, and that is this little feature down here. It's the emergency access gate. So a key feature to that, and we really wanted to show this on the screen because we had talked about it originally with the community, and we heard pretty clearly that that secondary access is absolutely a priority, and so we wanted to make sure our alternative was reflecting that. And so with that emergency access, we're proposing a gate controlled access on the existing Toadstool Road so that it would not be used to basically bypass any potential intersection improvement, but is available in the event of an emergency or situation that would impact functionality of the intersection. We're going to come back to those features a little bit, but just to give you a brief overview of what we've been hearing since we released this recommended alternative. A lot of the positives that we're hearing from the community is that it does separate the through traffic of the Seward Highway from the local traffic into Girdwood. And that was absolutely one of our top goals while looking at alternatives, because we know that that's where most of the conflict is occurring. We've also heard that the free flow movements that are a strong feature of this proposed recommended alternative is highly valued. Free flow, no stops, and that is seen as a positive thing. Our solution is going to give the Old Girdwood Townsite neighborhood its own dedicated legal access, which currently does not exist. And we're looking at slightly shifting the highway, which Joe and Ryan will talk more about in a little bit, but that is going to result in a new bridge over the railroad. The existing one does not meet railroad standards, and they are very supportive of that aspect of the project. And a part of this is also the pathway. We're looking at bringing that up to ADA standards and new grade. We're excited about that. some of the concerns we're hearing. These on the screen are actually pulled also from the minutes of the most recent Joint Land Use Committee meeting and GBOS Committee meeting you guys had on August 30th. And these are really the concerns we're going to try to address over the next portion of our presentation, kind of talking through the different aspects of our recommended alternative and hopefully touching on all of these points. And again, if we don't, we're excited to have a conversation with you. So at this point, I am going to hand it over to Ryan to kick us off, talking a little bit more about our key design aspects.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Gessel, project engineer, lead civil for R&M Consultants. We just wanted to touch on a few of the major design elements that this alternative has and explain why they're designed this way, why they look this way, explain kind of how we came up with this design. So right off the bat, the intersection, an at-grade intersection has a lot of conflict points, which means you have a high chance of getting T-boned or crashes like that, just high severity crashes. So the best way to do that is to separate those two roads. That means constructing a bridge. So that eliminates those conflict points, makes that all those turning movements a lot safer, and it allows for free flow for the through traffic for the Seward Highway and for Alice as well.
Oh yeah, thank you, Juan. As we're going to click through these alternatives, it's going to be that hot pink or purple highlight as we go in between these slides. So the first one we had the bridge highlighted, and now we're going to be looking at the southbound acceleration lane.
So with the bridge, and you have this grade separation between the two highways, you need to get those vehicles back on the highway somehow. And that means getting these vehicles up to speed. With holding the Glacier Creek Bridge is kind of a boundary point for this project. We need to work back from that and give enough length for these vehicles to get up from 20 miles an hour from that ramp there back up to highway speeds to merge safely. So that's why we kind of shifted this whole intersection to the west and to provide that distance for vehicles to safely travel up to get to those speeds.
Do you mind if I ask a question now? It's okay. On the last point on the acceleration on the on-ramp, that's basically at the same grade, isn't it? That's a flat
So
acceleration.
the bridge, the blue bridge there will be up above the highway.
But the purple section or the pink section
that
there
one
is all basically the same.
will get safe. So you'll be able to see cars that you'll be merging into. You'll be able to find a gap or a space to get into the flow of traffic.
And the next slide talks about the clover leaf that brings the vehicles from the elevated grade down to at grade with the Seward Highway, and it kind of allows them to slowly, come into parallel with through traffic on Seward Highway. So that allows for free flow of traffic, without having to stop and navigate this intersection going from one highway to another.
One major thing with this too is we also got designed for trucks. There's a lot of trucks that travel through this, that get into the mall, especially the fuel trucks and even motorhomes that are hauling trailers and stuff. So you got to kind of design these things to accommodate those larger vehicles. They tend to travel, slower speeds, so they need that additional size and length to get back up onto highway speeds. So it's kind of why it's that big. If you went into smaller, it would just feel too small if you're driving that.
And during wintertime conditions, the drivability of getting around that corner at enough speed to be able to merge safely is a consideration.
Yeah.
So this one is the northbound deceleration lane. One of the existing kind of issues with the current intersection layout is the turn lane has to start after the existing Glacier Creek Bridge. And that doesn't allow for enough time to safely, for all vehicles in all conditions, slow down to make the turn onto Main Street. And yeah, what that results in is vehicles end up decelerating while in the through lanes of the Seward Highway. This, as shown there in the magenta on the screen, that allows significant or enough space to where vehicles can exit off of the highway and then begin slowing down enough to navigate the ramp and merge onto the Alyeska Highway, and it prevents the need to slow down on the existing or on the through lanes of the Seward Highway.
And actually, Mike, kind of piggybacking on your question before about the southbound lane being at grade, this would have a uphill grade.
But does that result in the linear distance of that being shorter because it's uphill? Yeah.
Great, yeah, it does help with that, yeah. Okay. It is because it slows down the vehicles better there.
Yeah.
Gravity's your friend.
And then
Exactly.
the radius of those ramps are also set to kind of control vehicles, the speed that, they should be going for the next maneuvers they're going to take.
There's a leg.
So this feature here is an overheight vehicle bypass. And what this accomplishes is southbound vehicles on the Seward Highway that are overheight or won't fit underneath the Alyeska Highway Bridge. Those can use this to bypass the intersection. I think it's worth noting that the bridge will be designed so that most loads that don't require a special permit will be able to fit underneath it. So this is not your average load. This is more the exception. And it's also noted that it'll be not accessible to the general traveling public. It would be controlled as in having either possibly a gate or a curb, a type of curb that delineates it, or signage, or most likely some combination of those things.
And I'll add to that too. So we're coordinating with the Alaska Trucking Association too on what height they would like to see. So we design it to at least the minimum, preferably the desirable. They've had some questions too on and concerns about what height or what clearance they want. So there's still some decisions to be made on what clearance that should be.
Would this be the only bridge going over the Seward Highway south of Anchorage? It would.
What was that?
Would this be the only bridge going over the Seward Highway south of Anchorage? I know there are some in Anchorage itself.
I think the closest bridge would be Rapid Creek Road.
Right, yeah. So
Yeah.
there are alternatives, obviously, there. Yeah, there are.
There are, yeah.
Got it.
So one of the major issues of the highway currently is the closely spaced driveways into the mall. So you have the Alyeska Highway, you have the driveway into the mall, and then you got Main Street accessing the highway. So that creates a lot of safety concerns and congestion concerns. So one way to do that is to move the highway south. You kind of separating the through traffic that goes to the Kenai Peninsula away from the local traffic in the mall and in Old Girdwood, and for people that travel into Girdwood. So we moved everything kind of south to kind of separate all that, kind of divide everything into its own proper traffic movements, I guess. What this also does is it kind of sets us up for the future, if or when it ever happens that future fully divided highway, it kind of got at least the start of it. So we're not putting ourselves into a corner in the future where that's not possible. This kind of sets us up for that.
A bonus of this as well is with the off of existing alignment of the Seward Highway means that we can do construction without any temporary detours. So we can continue to use the existing Seward Highway during construction of this intersection, throughout its whole process, which is a big time and cost savings.
Yep.
The next feature to talk about is the Alyeska Highway merge lanes. These might be a little bit more important than they kind of appear. I think to illustrate that, we'll kind of describe some traffic movements and see how vehicles would use these. So if you were a northbound traffic or a northbound vehicle coming from Seward, and then you merge onto take the deceleration lane off ramp on the Seward Highway, if you wanted to go to Old Girdwood, you would just stay in the right-hand lane, and then there's a free right that doesn't involve entering the roundabout, and then you proceed on to the Girdwood station, or the station mall, or with that same traffic, exiting off of northbound on the highway, if they wanted to proceed to Girdwood, they would merge in this section, these merge lanes, merge into the left-hand lane, and then proceed through the roundabout to Girdwood. Additionally, traffic coming over the Alyeska Highway Bridge over the Seward Highway has those same options. But both lanes could lead to Old Girdwood, the leftmost being the free right, and then the rightmost being the free right, and then the left one having the option of either going over or on. And it's important to note that a lot of the features of geometry, like the ramps coming up to this, are intention, and the proceeding of the roundabout, it's designed to kind of slow people down, so there's low speed and it's nice and straight on a tangent, so there's high visibility for vehicles merging in this area. It's design considerations.
So going through a bunch of the alternatives, we had a lot of positive feedback on putting a roundabout at this intersection. Obviously, we could do a stop sign or a traffic signal, but the DOT has kind of adopted a roundabout first policy, and that means to kind of look at this first. So with this, we feel that it would provide the best, or the most improvements in terms of safety and traffic flow at this intersection. So we would design this obviously to accommodate all the large trucks that go in and out of the mall and Girdwood, any of the tour buses, people that use motorhomes to go around this thing. It'll be well lit. You got changes coming in, you got roads that can be well visible, low speed. It should function a lot better than, let's say, a traffic signal, which would have people backing up into the mall probably, or even into those merge lanes that Joe talked about. So we feel this is the best solution for this location other than the solution.
Could you say something about the number of lanes coming into or out of the roundabout there? So on the southern side of the roundabout, there are 2 lanes going in northbound, 1 coming out.
So we're looking at kind of a free right. So if you want to go to the mall, if you're coming from Acreage and you want to go to the mall, you'll kind of have your own lane just to go. You'll just be able to get there.
Okay, so it's not really 2 lanes on the roundabout.
Yeah,
One is
one lane. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it'll be a single lane. So as this is kind of a resultant of kind of what happens when you move the intersection to the west and you have this roundabout here, you want to provide kind of a straight line so that everything's visible, which leads to improved safety. So that's kind of why we realigned Alyeska the way we did. We didn't want to add a bunch of curves in there that just makes everybody frustrated. The other thing that this does is it allows us to build that new bridge kind of off of the current alignment of Alyeska. It'll build it bigger and to what the railroad wants to see. And so that allows us to do it kind of away from people driving on Alyeska today. So we can build it all, without any interruptions to current traffic flows. There wouldn't be any temporary bridges, which would save additional money, and it would all be to the final product and not any kind of temporary stuff needs to get built or torn down.
Yeah, one last thing to add to that would be just the movement away from Old Girdwood allows the space, among other things, to consolidate all the local access. It just provides the space needed to construct the local access road. It's not the only thing that does that, but it contributes to that.
The pathway is a nice bonus of all of that as well.
So that leads into the actual, the local access road there to provide local access to the Girdwood Station Mall and Old Girdwood. What this does, it still has so the station mall would maintain all of the approaches, driveways that it has right now. But it transitions them from slow moving, turning traffic, leaving any of the given approaches onto high-speed highway traffic. They transitioned that onto a low-speed local road, which provides for much safer traffic maneuvers. And yeah, one of the major goals was to kind of eliminate those conflict points on between high-speed facilities and low-speed traffic. This just consolidates it all through the roundabout.
I think it's important to note here as well that the proximity of those driveways directly onto the Seward Highway and the proximity to the Alyeska and Seward Highway intersection is really close and not something that FAA or DOT is open to or looking to continue. So at this point, really, any improvement to the Seward Highway at this point would likely result in the removal of those direct driveways onto the Seward Highway at that location. So we're very happy with this solution because, as Joe and Ryan have been saying, it's free flow all the way into and out of that area, and we're giving more distance of roadway to accommodate any congestion that we know exists there.
Yeah, it reduces confusion on people getting in and out of there. So people have, with this design, it kind of lends itself to people say, hey, I know where to go now. I don't have to look for people going 65, 70 miles an hour on the highway to try to shoot that and try to get in and get there. Now it kind of, it's like, hey, I can have a nice road to get it out of there. I can go through a roundabout and I can get the speed comfortably and safely.
Yeah, it eliminates those split-second decisions. Just all your decisions, you have time. It's there. The vehicle speeds in the area are appropriate. System.
I think Jennifer has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you explain a little bit about the that pink arrow saying Old Girdwood access? Are you talking about, was that addressing the neighborhood concerns about ease of access onto the highway? Is that what that was about?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're just trying to highlight kind of that whole leg of the roundabout. So the connection to Gold Avenue is being addressed in this, as well as the driveways directly into the Girdwood Station Mall. So it's a bit of both. Did that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anything else on this?
This is probably a good point to ask one question. So I've heard concern from businesses in the Girdwood Station Mall, and I think you said you had spoken to a number of businesses there. I'm not sure they completely agree with that until the last day or two, but they are obviously concerned of impact and reduction of the number of customers who go there. Has there been any kind of study on that, or what happens in other similar redesigns when direct access is removed and there's a much more circuitous access?
I don't think there's not a specific study talking about like trips per day from any one thing to another. But I think it all comes down to as Taryn was kind of mentioning earlier, that the consolidation of all these approaches directly onto the Seward Highway is a big kind of concern of the existing condition. And this particular alternative consolidates them. However, other alternatives would likely seek to achieve the same goal due to the safety concerns inherent with having those rapid multiple accesses in close succession to each other.
Okay,
and
so
adequate turning points.
So the fact there's direct access now, you're saying basically the days are numbered for that, whatever happens. Any change to this part of the road is going to result in those being
More likely than not, yes.
But that then the secondary question is, this is obviously a much less obvious connection. Is that going to act as a disincentive?
There's going to be some break-in period with any design that we'll do here, but eventually people will understand it and they'll know how to get in and out of there. Change. People just got to change them. That's just the way. We've been doing this for years and years and years. So eventually people will get it. I think the biggest thing to note is that it's all free flow. Nobody's stopping just go, you don't really have to stop. It's all kind of straightforward design. If you want to go to the mall, you take this exit and the design will kind of lead you there. There's very little decision making that needs to be done. If you want to go back to the sewer or Kenai, then there will be plenty of signage to tell people like, hey, this is the route to get in and out of there.
Yeah, and that's a big part of this. Like we definitely recognize the concern there, especially with the visibility. You know, as the intersection exists right now, people can make that last second decision to make a hard left. That might be a little dangerous. To stop for gas, you know, get some pizza, get some ice cream. Part of the solution would definitely include signage ahead of the intersection, alerting travelers that there are, you know, facilities here, entertainment facilities, however they would like to be, you know, signed. And that's something that DOT is prepared to work with the Girdwood Station Mall and the businesses in it to properly sign for that.
I have a question.
Go
So this is a fairly big project, and have you considered like a discrete PL for this as a study as opposed to, I know typically those are addressed on big corridors, but there's quite a bit of environmental impact in here and economic and egress and egress, whatever, coming in, coming out of Girdwood, impact in here. And have you considered a PL for this, or have you looked at that component of it?
Can I answer this?
Yeah, absolutely, Christina. Come on up.
So PEO stands for Planning and Environmental.
Christina, could you, so we have people.
So PEL is a planning and environmental linkage study. And it combines the phases of the planning phase, or much of the planning phase, with much of the environmental phase. Normally, we do both of those phases, but one after the other. The advantage of doing them linkage is saving time. So what I can say is that we don't feel like this is complex enough of a project that we need to do that to save time. And it doesn't mean that we won't, I guess what I'm saying is we will be doing all of the things that a PEL would do, but in a slightly different order. The environmental work on this, we've just started on some of the studies, wetland mapping and so forth. We won't really be starting on the environmental document until the end of this year, probably. And that'll be fairly extensive look at the impacts and what kind of mitigation can be done.
Yeah, I was curious, yeah, if those environmental impacts were taken into consideration before the design, you know, and I think PLs typically try to do that to mitigate those type of impacts. And, you know,
Right.
that part of the highway is it's pretty unique, and you know, so I didn't know if you guys had looked at that, you know, before design or considered it before design.
As we evaluated the alternatives against each other, keeping the footprint of the project as small as possible while still solving the problems was one of the high priorities that we factored into that. And we do believe that this design is the smallest footprint that solves the problem. Besides the footprint, there's been several concerns about the view shed. And we also feel like this, while it does change the view shed, changes it at kind of the smallest angle that it could do so and still solve the problem.
And I guess one other question for me. you know, outside of the environmental impact. And I don't think Beals actually addressed the economic impact of what that would do. But the Toadstool Road kind of gated thing, I think is a concern. And I don't know if you've investigated that further. Like with, I know our fire department's a little worried about, or not worried, but they're concerned about, you know, one way to get out of Girdwood only, as opposed to having that option. Because, and DOT and the railroad and everybody uses that road as well. So just, you know, I don't know if you've taken that in consideration, but it might be something you would consider.
What, I'm sorry, consider keeping that connected?
And
No, keeping the Toadstool Road not a gated.
just open.
But
Because right now, it's, right now, DOT uses it, people who live over there use it, and plus it gives, you know, our emergency services a way to get out of town if there was something to happen at the interchange, you know.
Well, we definitely want it to be available for emergency services and also for if there were to be, say, some kind of a crash at the roundabout that would be blocking traffic, people can get around it in a case like that.
Right.
But people that, I mean, the DOT station, for instance, they can still get there. They're gonna take the cloverleaf, go through the roundabout, and then go on this section here that's in pink right now. It's longer. One problem with leaving Toadstool as open to the public is that you can see it's within the ramp there. It usually causes problems to have accesses within ramps. We usually avoid that.
Asking if it's taken into consideration, and it should be, as far as a way to, an open way to come in and out of Girdwood as opposed to one other route. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, and I will add that we've got a couple of other slides that might help illustrate some of the points that Christina was making about viewshed, as well as the footprint of the project and other alternatives we've been considering. But yeah, I would like to just kind of underscore as well that the environmental aspects, at least we're at concept level still. We haven't started the deep dive into all of this, but we recognize that we know we're in the wetlands, and that's been something that's been a high priority of our considerations throughout the process, and will continue to be so. We're fully prepared for the full MEPA process.
Do you have a couple more slides before you finish this presentation?
We do, yes.
Right, I'm going to wait until they get to the end of the presentation before I invite the public comments. Okay.
Do you have anything more about this role? I think we're good. Okay, cool. Oh, perfect segue. Forgot how far along we were. That's great. So in regards to the view shed, we know we're proposing a bridge. We know we're proposing a grade change, and that is absolutely a change, and that, we want to try to mitigate that. So we have built a 3D model of this project. Hopefully, if you guys haven't seen it yet, we've got a fly-through video and a couple of still shots that are available on the project website. I also just want to disclose that we are aware that there are more Kenai mountains than our model is showing. The extent of the model didn't allow us to include them, but just to be abundantly clear, we will not be removing Kenai mountains through this project. So this.
You need to get the fill from somewhere.
Right. So this view is from the Girdwood Station Mall. As you can see, that first driveway after you make the turn from the Seward Highway onto Alyeska. And another benefit of the shift that our recommended alternative is showing is that it's moving farther away from the existing station mall. And so with that, the viewshed impact is reduced as compared to, if we were not to shift the intersection. And, as we had stated before, the grade separation is really critical to solving most of these issues. So we're hoping that kind of minimizes it a bit more. And actually, this is a great example too, Mike, to your point about the elevation changes, when that's happening, how significant they are. And from this angle, they're all pretty relatively flat, or we're just starting to climb after the existing alignment. We also heard and read from the minutes of the meeting, the joint meeting that the Land Use Committee and you guys had last month. We had some questions about why alternative 8, which was included in that initial preliminary 11 set of alternatives, was eliminated, or if we had done additional analysis on it. And we removed it after that first set of analysis, and we think for pretty compelling reasons. And I'll let Joe and Ryan explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so roundabouts are very sensitive to like the context that they're installed in. They're really more tuned for like lower speed, even up to 45-mile-an-hour speed roads. So the context is very important with roundabouts. So given that, putting it on a major highway like the Seward Highway, it would tend to add additional delay for most travelers coming from north of Girdwood to the peninsula and vice versa. If you think about it today, well, the Seward Highway, we all know in the summer it's very busy. In the winter it's not. So when it's not busy, most of the time you can just flow right through without any stop, without any delay, 55, 60, whatever. When you add a roundabout in here like this, that means that every vehicle will have to slow down to go through this and navigate through this at 25, 30 miles an hour. So that adds additional delay. It adds additional frustration to the driver, which leads to unsafe moves further down, up and down the highway. They get mad and they cut people off, and that leads to more accidents. And additionally, in the winter, things get icy. We get fog down here, and with wet weather, it doesn't quite freeze up as well as it should. So you'll tend to get icy conditions. So you can imagine people trying to slow down on these curves. You'll experience losing friction on the highway. And then I'll also mention, with people traveling left into the mall with this, roundabouts are designed, we've all probably driven them. The people that are in the roundabout have priority, and certain movements, that are less priority on this thing, they will have the right of way to through traffic. And you can imagine people coming home on a Sunday afternoon from fishing down the peninsula, and somebody making a left turn into the mall, you'll have stacks of cars heading northbound into Anchorage, and it could back up on the Glacier Creek Bridge, which, nobody's going to be happy with that. So that's kind of the highlights there. It just adds more delay than we want to see.
I think I can add to that more is one of the key things to make a roundabout functional is there needs to be gaps in the traffic for vehicles to merge and enter into and off of the roundabout. When you have peak volumes on the Seward Highway during, peak events, probably during the summertime, if you have continuous flow from any two legs of the roundabout, it can effectively stagnate the third leg until there's a turning movement that stops traffic. So if you just have constant through traffic, it doesn't provide room. In this case would likely be to Alyeska for vehicles to make that left-handed turn, because they got to be able to enter on the roundabout first. Another side effect of that could be with this particular layout, those vehicles waiting on Alyeska Highway could possibly and likely back up into the roundabout up at Golden. And then that would cause internal circulation issues with that roundabout that has nothing to do with that intersection by itself. It's probably also important to know that this was, and it's kind of stamped on the figure there, that this figure at this time didn't represent in-depth engineering analysis. It was conceptual to kind of just convey the point. But what's shown right there would much likely need to be bigger. By the time you apply all engineering design standards to it, it's going to need to be much bigger and it would likely be much more impactful.
Yeah, to kind of give a scale for that, you can imagine what the alternative 7 was back when it first started. It was kind of small, kind of localized to this kind of area. And to what we have today, it kind of grew, as we apply all these standards from the federal guidelines and standards, things like that. So if you could imagine going from the Alt 7, that small design we had, to what we have today, it's kind of what would be the scale for this alternative, going from a small roundabout to a bigger one.
I guess the short of it is that while this would potentially address the local access issue for Girdwood, it doesn't give us a satisfying solution for the through traffic aspect. And instead of removing conflict points, it modifies them to be more of that roundabout, which we do acknowledge would be, just in terms of the number of driveways and the number of conflict points would be a reduction, but it's not going to achieve the goals that we've set out for in the same way that the recommended alternative that we've developed would do.
Also, maybe address the access to this roundabout. That's ideal. This would load all the traffic.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
Very extra.
I don't-
That's strong there.
Yeah, did you guys hear it? I can repeat it. I can repeat that.
Yeah, as it's shown right now, it eliminates, you can see all of the accesses that are currently from the Girdwood Station Mall onto Alaska Highway and onto the Seward Highway. Those get eliminated. And so this would then put all that traffic onto Main and Gold Avenue, and have them access for the existing access points around there. This is more anecdotal at this point though, but the internal circulation of the mall, it's set up a certain way to allow certain vehicles to access certain points. So if you go and modify that, there could be some concerns. Again, we haven't performed detailed engineering analysis on that aspect of it, but we do anecdotally know that that would be a problem.
While we were discussing, conceptual alternatives and the wetland potential impacts, viewshed impacts, we did want to show this figure. So as we've been working through that top 3 alternative analysis portion, that purple or the dark blue color design on here was alternative 11 applied with a bit more engineering, actual design to that concept. So this is the diamond concept. It's overlaid on our modified alternative 7. So our recommended alternative is in the pink. And we thought that this was a good piece of discussion just to show that while there are other alternatives that, shook out fairly well under preliminary analysis, the horizontal footprint of that diamond alternative is going to end up being more significant than what we're recommending with our alternative. And the footprint extends pretty far still to the south as well. And so again, to that environmental piece of it, like we're aware and we're trying to make our decisions to minimize that footprint as much as we can up front at this concept level. And yeah, we're definitely keeping tabs on that and keeping concern. Another feature with that diamond, that blue design is that it is a little, those on and off ramps, the acceleration and deceleration lanes are coming a bit closer to the Girdwood Station Mall and Old Girdwood. So that's going to have a bit more of a viewshed impact just because our on and off ramps are going to have to start a little bit higher. So you're going to be getting that elevation grade. It won't flatten out quite as quickly as the shift of our trumpet alternative does. So, do you have anything else you wanted to add with this one? Okay. Awesome. So I'm sorry that was, we went into a lot of detail, but that's what we're hoping to do today. And yeah, we would love to answer any questions, hear your thoughts on all of this. And I want to thank you for your time and listening to our detail.
Thank you. So I'll invite board members who have further questions. Guy.
Just, question, comment. I would encourage DOT to work with our Chief Weston and understand the issues with getting in and out of Girdwood. And question, so I'm concerned about it, and I think other people are, about the impact to the wetlands. And, that's a pretty cool place over there. And, how do you get around that? How do you what's your mitigation or banking that, or, I mean, how can you even get through that process? And if you do bank it, is it going to be in our community or in this you know, our area, or will be banked in like in Arizona or something, you know, else?
Yeah, no, guy, thank you for the question. We actually have Christy, our environmental specialist, on the line. Christy, do you want to field that one?
Absolutely. This is Christy McLean with R&M, Environmental Specialist. And I completely agree with you. The wetlands out there are very special, and they provide habitat for all the critters out there. And we do understand that impacts need to be minimized and avoided wherever possible. For any unavoidable wetland impacts, we know that mitigation will be required, and that is kind of the next step in the process, permitting after the NEPA phase. But that doesn't say that we won't be coordinating and consulting with the Corps of Engineers during this whole process and the other agencies. So we'll all be working collaboratively to find the least impactful alternative. And we understand legally and by the regulations, the Corps is only authorized to or is only allowed to authorize the least impactful alternative. So the goal behind the design is to identify the solution that is going to have the smallest footprint, least impact, which solves the problem. So we understand what's coming as far as the permitting process, and that we need to defend and justify the solution here, demonstrate that these impacts are unavoidable, and then work through mitigation. There's a lot of opportunities for mitigation here. It won't be outside of Alaska. We try to do a watershed approach as much as possible. So, you know, whether or not there is a local mitigation bank, if we can set aside some land forever as a conservation easement to preserve those, if there's some high value wetlands out there that are potentially under threat of development, it's a possibility to set those aside. So that is definitely part of the process. We have it on all of our minds, and we'll be looking for all of those solutions as we go through the design process.
Thank you, Christy. Yeah, no, I could totally appreciate that. And that look, I don't know if we're going to be able to bank this within this watershed, you know, which I think that's what Leadbed and the Corps likes to see, is if we're going to do something to this wetlands, then we would like to conserve wetlands within this watershed. Yeah, I think people are concerned about it, and I just want to bring that up. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm going to come to you in a second, Brianna, but I'm just going to ask a quick follow-up on that. When the Corps is thinking about watersheds, are we talking about Turnagain Arm, Glacier Creek, or the whole of Cook Inlet? And what does watershed mean in this context?
Are you asking?
I'm asking, so, well, if you know the answer. I was asking Christy.
It would be the localized watershed. You start as local and, you know, project area specific as possible. Ideally, the opportunity for mitigation would be within your project vicinity. And then based on the opportunities that are there, you kind of start going outwards. So whether or not it's a mitigation bank in Anchorage, or a transfer of property that's in this vicinity, or that compensates for the wetlands that are being impacted. So it is tied to the type of wetlands that are impacted and the functions and values that they provide to the watershed, both locally and a little bit broader in scope.
I would, Christy, I don't know if we have any banks here or credits here within the greater, I mean, even within Portage Valley, do we? Is that even an opportunity for this?
I don't think there's any existing mitigation banks in the very near term, but there is also applicant proposed mitigation, which could be educational, like I was saying, setting aside wetland areas that could be impacted by other development and other projects. And that is one of the benefits of this project, is that the proposal actually includes incorporating additional property to prevent them from being developed in other ways. So yeah, we start locally and expand outward to make sure that we compensate for the impacts. And I will tell you too, the Corps will require a higher ratio of mitigation to actual impact. So, you know, we could be providing mitigation on the order of, you know, a ratio of 6 to 1 for the amount of impacts. So, but that's a little further down the line when we have the project a little more defined and know what we're getting into. And also there's some more wetland studies that need to be developed as far as what the functions and values of these wetlands are.
On that very last point on the functions and values and types, am I right in thinking there's a distinction between the wetlands to the south of Seward Highway versus the wetlands to the north of Seward Highway in this area?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes.
So the value is much higher to the south. Would that be the correct assumption?
They provide a different function. I won't necessarily say that they are valued differently. Yep.
Thank you. Brianna, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for the presentation and thorough answers. I guess I have one first for Christy or Christina. I have lots of questions, but this one will emphasize, hopefully, Guy's statements about the wetlands concerns. So my first question would be that I think from what I've heard, having an area set aside or in a conservation or a preserve of some sort would be really nice, because this is not only a scenic highway and byway, but a lot of people take photos all around this spot because they're already stopped and they already unsafely pull over to take photos on the ocean side. So in the future, if this is the project proposal, is there something planned to include or collaborate with a viewing area or something like that? And then I'm segue to that is all those little rectangles right below the Girdwood Station Mall map. Who owns that property right now?
So most of that property DOT has acquired over the last several years. Those black lines are all property lines. So you can see that there are all those small properties there. And then to the left of them, there's one large parcel with one owner. And the first part of your question again?
It's mental health. This mental health trust land right there. And I believe the first part of the question was about, I'm sorry, to the left. The big parcel, yeah. And then the first part of your question in terms of viewing spots or people pulling over, we recognize that definitely first and foremost is a safety hazard. But that is something that could be negotiated through this process as well. At this point, with our concept level design, that's not a priority of the design, but that doesn't mean it isn't something that could be considered as we get farther along in the process.
I feel like I should point out that it doesn't address the purpose and need of the project. So we have limited availability with limited options with the federal money that's paying for this project to do quote extras that aren't about solving the problem. But there is, and this is way speculative at this point, sometimes things like that are part of the mitigation for the environmental impacts. So that's a discussion that I'm sure is going to happen at some point.
Thank you. And may I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, sure. And then we'll go to Jennifer after that. Okay.
The first one will just be the PEL. And if it begins this winter, would any of those results take, I don't know how long they will all take, will any of those results change the project so much that you'll go to one of the alternate options?
So first of all, we're not doing a PEL, but we are doing the NEPA process. And that's what we'll be starting, we hope, by the end of the year, potentially a little bit later. There's always the possibility that what you're describing could happen, but I can't really think why, because we've put so much effort in at this point to identify what's the smallest footprint that is required to solve the problem. It's hard for me to imagine a way to change any of the other alternatives so that they would solve the problem and give us a smaller footprint, but it's always possible.
Okay, thank you. I'll save other ones for more questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Brianna. Jennifer?
Thank you. Actually, I think it's kind of connected with what Brianna and Guy have been saying again about this wetland area. Am I correct in the way I'm reading this map? I think this is right in the area that the cranes like to land in the fall. Is that?
Yes.
So I have to say, I don't see cranes anywhere else along my drive from Anchorage down to Girdwood. And I imagine that they would be unimpressed by whatever mitigation things we might be able to come up with. And I have to say that I would agree with the Girdwood residents who have said they'd be really saddened to see this, because it would make a permanent and irrevocable change to one of the most beautiful and just absolutely incredible aspects of our falls. And I understand that you're talking about footprint from maybe a mathematical point of view, but I'm wondering if there might be an argument geographically that this is actually a huge footprint.
Well, I guess one thing that I feel like I need to point out is if we were to say, oh, we don't, and nobody wants to fill the wetland, right? But if we were to say, we're going to set a hard limit and say we're not going to fill any wetlands on the arm side of the highway, that would mean we would have to move the highway into Girdwood. That means we have to take out the mall and Old Girdwood. And we just didn't consider that as being at all something desirable. We're stuck here. Anything that's not Old Girdwood and the mall is wetland.
Did you have a follow-up, Jennifer? I think I saw your hand come back up.
Yes, actually, I was just wondering if we could revisit the slide that had option 11 superimposed.
There might be a lag, I apologize.
Okay, if I could look at that slide for just a sec, I will screenshot that, and then I will hold my other questions like Brianna.
Yeah, and sorry, I just want to apologize. We did throw this in after I sent our draft presentation over to Margaret, but we'll be sure to get this over to her to get that posted with the minutes, and we'll post this presentation to our project website as well.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then I'm going to move over to the public after that. So we go back to the preferred design.
I think I can.
Things I want to ask.
If we're okay with some pink on it, it'll be best.
So I think I have a fundamental problem with this design, and I think it comes down to, I'm sorry, I can't remember if it was Joe or Ryan who mentioned this. I think you said one of the criteria was the navigation from highway to highway, and the area to the south of Seward Highway, so that the Trumpet intersection itself is exactly that. It's an intersection between, the Glen and the Park. It's an intersection between two high-speed highways, but we don't have that here. We have an intersection between a high-speed highway and a local access road into a community. So the very fact you're putting a roundabout, a few hundred yards north of that seems to sort of take away the idea that you can travel pretty much at full speed around the cloverleaf or onto the bridge. And I do not understand why that trumpet design is preferable to something closer to a tight diamond, where you have effectively at the on-ramp, or sorry, the off-ramp would be going up grade, so therefore it will be smaller. The off-ramp would be going down grade, and therefore could be shorter. And from what I can tell, definitely if you measure the space here compared to other similar intersections in Anchorage, there's the space to do that without interfering with Glacier Creek Bridge. So I do not understand why the trumpet is preferable to something where you go up to effectively to a T-junction, because we want to slow down traffic. It's not 65 into Girdwood. Now I know there were some issues around retaining walls with one of the specific type diamond designs, but there are other small variations on that which would not have the same restriction. So what I would like to understand is why that design, the continuous flow was such a priority when it is not a highway to highway intersection. It's a highway to local access intersection, or intermediate access collector, if you like.
Yeah, well, I guess the best way I can try to answer that is one of the biggest issues we ran into, and kind of a little bit more analysis to the tight diamond in particular, is there's nothing inherently wrong with the stop intersection on the ramps. That's totally fine. You could make the geometry work there. The traffic volume should be relatively low. That should not be an insurmountable thing. That should really work. When you apply current design standards to it, though, the actual length required for passenger vehicles and definitely more particular trucks to be able to accelerate from that stop condition up to the speeds they need to safely merge onto the highway before the Glacier Creek Bridge. The numbers come out. It's not quite enough. What we have with this preferred alternative, it's kind of a balance of it's enough. It's sufficient distance while maintaining the speed that they carry around the collider loop, and then accelerating from that speed, which is the design speed of the loop rather than stopped, to be able to get up to the highway and then merge.
Unfortunately, it seems like you're not using the benefits of the elevation there, because you have to restrict the speed around the clover. So you're not using the elevation for acceleration because the cloverleaf design itself is a limitation, and then you're accelerating on a single grade. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure what's probably happened is the design standards have changed since other Seward highway intersections were created, but I'd like to understand that better, because I'm not convinced there's a problem with for example, Tudor, giving a single example. That's the dimensions of that would fit within this design, given that you've now moved the intersection itself to the west. And by doing that, then obviously you remove the trumpet itself isn't there, and that seems to be what I hear from a lot of people is the objection. And what I can tell is that's driven by, excuse the pun, that's driven by the need to have continuous flow through that intersection when we have a roundabout and we want to reduce speed surely to the north anyway. So I think there's a conflict here, and I'd like to understand as well how you balance these different criteria when you went through the top three. I wonder if continuous flow is perhaps a higher priority than we would put up.
Can I jump in, Joe? Continuous flow we consider to be ideal, but the problem, it isn't the primary goal. The goal is to eliminate the left turn conflicts. So we eliminate those left turn conflicts by having a grade separation.
Yes.
We get from that to continuous flow by putting in the roundabout farther up. Otherwise, we have an intersection there, and there's some stopping there, right? We could do that in terms of the purpose and need of the project. That would work. We put in the roundabout because we felt like, in addition to people being able to make that movement from on the freeway, or on the highway into Girdwood, or Girdwood onto the highway. We want them to be able to make that without having to cross any other movements.
Okay.
So right there at that intersection, we do want, it comes out as free flow.
Right. So I guess the distinction is between no stopping whatsoever and a conflict between southbound traffic from Seward Highway going into Girdwood and traffic leaving
Yes,
Girdwood
yes.
going to southbound.
That's an excellent point.
But that's the
And I think
that's
this,
the point you would have a conflict.
I think this drawing will help us talk about that. So several points. One is that, actually, let's do back up if there's not too much lag to the view shed thing. So if we have the tight diamond, it's going to, you're going to see all across this area, you've got ramps coming up to the bridge and ramps coming down from the bridge. So you're going to have a much bigger view shed impact here. So that's one of the reasons we saw as a strike against that. Okay, let's go back again. We don't have the drawing here of the tight diamond, but for any of you who aren't familiar, it's basically these ramps that are on the lower part of the page would pull up closer to the highway. And that would mean, again, they would have to be up at the elevation of the bridge, right? When we first drew the concept, it was very tight. We just drew it just like a line right next to it, right? In reality, if you look at that a little more, that doesn't have turning radii that trucks can make or buses. All right, so it couldn't really be completely tight, right? So it would have more of a footprint than when you look at what we called the tight diamond before, okay? So another thing that happens here is that your vehicles now that are going to, can I mouse here somehow? That are going to come to this roundabout. Okay, so you're coming out of Girdwood, you want to go south to Seward. Many times you're going to be able to navigate this without stopping, but you are going to have to yield to traffic in that roundabout. So a certain amount of the time you're going to be at speed 0 here. And again, our constraint is when you get over to Glacier Creek, you have to be at speed 65. So delta of 65 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
With the Trumpet, you are at least probably 25 miles an hour when you start on the merge. Sorry, I messed up your thing here. I can't, that mouse is like glitching on me.
Very delayed.
So when you go under the bridge here, you're going to be at 25 and you need to be at 65 by the time you get to Glacier Creek. So it's a delta of 40 miles an hour. And that's why if you've got the diamond, you end up having to go much farther before you get to 65.
But the difference, of course, is from the diamond, you're not going flat. Your gravity is in your face.
Yes, but I think what you'll find is that,
what I would be interested in.
yes, and we can
Grade
look at-
helps, but it doesn't help to the degree that it would help that, keep it in the same location.
when we look at the standards, that the grade is considered in that.
Yeah.
There's a table that has.
Yeah.
that.
The required length is
So
different.
For your positive and negative grades, and it does affect them, but
Not a huge degree.
you have to make
Okay.
it less than the minimums that the design standards call.
Okay, understood.
Oh, and then one other thing is about the tight diamond is that because you've got those walls, we're trying to avoid walls in this part of the wetland because it is very difficult and expensive to build there.
Right, but I mean, that's a function of being a very tight diamond rather than a slightly less tight diamond, isn't it? There is space there.
That is true. There's kind of a spectrum of how that could be.
Okay. I have one other question as well. So obviously the follow-on is the small footprint comment. So again, I would think that something modified from the tight diamond would have a smaller footprint. And I think you explained partly why you didn't see that as an alternative. I'm yet to be convinced, but that's another discussion. Yeah, the other question I had was, I've heard, or I'm hearing, that there is funding available for this, and there is potentially a plan to implement this fit in the relatively short term. Can you say a little bit more about that?
I'm sorry?
That there is funding available potentially for this from IIJ or something. So, and I'd like to understand the status.
You're familiar with the state-wide transportation improvement
Yes.
plan? Okay, so there is, I don't remember exactly, somewhere between $30 and $35 million in the STIP plan and federal money for the construction.
So this design is now in the STIP.
This design isn't in the STIP, no. This design is not selected yet.
Okay.
But I guess I would have to say that the cost estimate is largely based on this design.
And that's around 35.
But that 30 to 35 was our preliminary estimate for this. Yeah, if we change to a different alternative, the cost would most likely change, but I don't know whether up or down.
Okay. So feasibly, given the timescales and the different funding sources here, what's a feasible implementation time on this?
Well, our instruction from our management is to build it as quickly as possible. I would say I don't see how feasibly there could be construction before 2025.
I'm interested as why this project is such a high priority versus others, and not that I mind. I'm just trying to understand why that would be.
Well, it's an excellent question. And I haven't heard this from the horse's mouth, but it appears pretty obvious to me that the emphasis is on the safety corridors in Central Region, because the high priority projects include this one and then the area between here and Potter's Marsh, that's safety corridor, and then an area on the Sterling Highway, that's safety corridor. That just seems to me like that's an emphasis on safety.
Okay, thank you. That's all the question I had immediately, but I might have some more later. Brianna, I see your hand is back up. You have a follow-up?
Thank you, Mike. Yes, real quick on that last one for the safety corridors. Some of the public feedback we received was that basically the argument of other parts of the Seward Highway having more fatalities and being more dangerous, like the McHugh Creek pull-off needing maybe another lane or things like that are already in a zone of construction, or other parts. I know the Seward Highway is always under construction, and then I'll stop there for that one.
Well, it's an excellent point, and I would just say there is a separate project in the STIP to address that area of the Seward Highway.
Okay, and then may I one more, the question, thank you very much, I appreciate the overlays. For number 11, the other slide I was looking at, it looked like a smaller footprint than this latest overlay for number 11, but if you could, does anyone know where the high tide level is? If you could point with the mouse.
Christy, can you help us with that?
Really? I apologize, I don't know.
Yeah.
20 years.
Is it really?
Where the colors are or not?
So we don't have a subject matter expert
I
here.
would think just for my, non-environmental answer, my engineering background and my non-environmental background is, probably where the mud flats are there. You can kind of see the gray, where the gray ends, brown begins. That would be my guess.
I think it's worth noting that you see there's two different colors of kind of background imagery there. Those are not They're just images taken at different time. The close-in cropped one is from drone imagery, which is going to be the most recent, so we want to use that in there. But then the surrounding stuff is just from MOA LiDAR.
Yes.
Imagery. It's a little bit older, but we just used kind of a hybrid to get the best of both.
Yeah, I apologize for not knowing that. We are going to have to find that out.
That pond will actually fluctulate on
It
the river height.
does.
I've hunted around that area and I've spent a lot of time down there, and
Yeah.
it will fluctuate on a really high tide.
We're-
The pond or the clover.
Yeah, and I think that speaks well to the fact that we are still at concept level of design, and that as we move forward, we already have a full team of professionals dedicated to wetland delineation, critical habitat, historic preservation, all of that. We're prepared.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
I'm gonna-
thank you.
I'm going to formally move on to item number 2, which is really just a continuation, but I'm going to open it up to everybody. I know you've been very patiently sitting there with your hand up, Brett. Do you want to ask some questions?
Thank you, Mike. Just real briefly, I had a couple comments on this, and I just wanted to say, as an engineer, I think this is great engineering. You guys have done from my observation, a great job in a lot of things, and I see all the constraints you're working with. So I just, engineers need a pat on the back every now and then. So hats off to you. Except for the swoops. The swoops along the bike path, that's been a real major scary point, and I see another one there, and so I was just going to comment that I'm anti-swoop and put that on the record. And then, but oh, go ahead.
Brett, can you define the swoop for me?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So when the bike path got redone along the Alyeska Highway, the bike path got merged into the road at the stop sign from all access roads, like at the mine roads, for instance, and it puts bikers within the shoulder, which was reduced in size along the highway, and it's kind of sketchy. And the other thing is that it eliminated our cross-country ski path in the wintertime, and it's also the entry point for vehicles onto the bike path. Which caused additional portable signs to have to be placed within the bike path at the swoop. And so those get in the way when you're riding your bicycle, and it just more obstacles. So I am not a fan of the swoops. And I
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you,
Got it. Thank you, Brett.
I guess I'm
Thank you.
still not clear. Are
We got
you,
it up here.
are there swoops in
Up at
our
the
designs?
top. Yeah, we got one, right?
That's another 3-hour discussion. So you're not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to go down that bike path with the swoops issue, but please, I'll move on. I happen to know the owner of the Girdwood sign, the Chamber of Commerce folks. Could I ask you to reach out and maybe close the loop if this design became accepted and going for construction? I think that Girdwood sign right in that roundabout as you head up the Alyeska Highway would be a great place to move the sign after this construction. If I'm just sort of asking that we could sort of somehow arrange that with the Chamber of Commerce. And then the parking at the wetlands, kind of at the corner, there were thoughts about putting the boardwalk down there as an interpretive thing. I'm imagining how that would work with this design. And my only thought would be, if you did put in something, a parking or a pull-off, it would be near the gated access to the oversized bypass, something kind of down in that corner. And that would allow people to take the pictures, interpret the wetlands and the wildlife. And it might even allow us to have access back to the skating pond in the wintertime in a safe manner without interfering with the highway. So my vote would be to put a little parking or a little, 6 slot or something there at the bypass gate. The toadstool issue, I still see 2 ways out of the valley with your design, even keeping toadstool for emergency access on the highway. So I don't see that as necessarily being an issue. There's only one short stretch of potential single point of failure, and I don't see that as being a huge issue. And then I want to put out a shout out to the HLB wetlands banking option. Might be something in the valley. There's a lot of wetland conservation banking going on with those lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Are there any other questions from the public in the MAR community in the room? Start with Betsy. Can you come to the front so people online can hear?
I'm curious if maybe this is on your website, what the fatality and accident rate is currently with what we have.
We don't have any records of any fatalities. I don't remember any actual numbers.
We do have it on the
that,
website.
yes.
Yeah, it's a part of our concept report, which was also submitted and reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we do have detailed documentation on that. I apologize for not having those numbers.
No, that's all right. I'll look it up. And I have a question about who owns some of this land with that, with the road that goes from the inside roundabout over to Toadstool.
Mm-hmm.
Who owns the land on each side?
That is Mental Health Trust land, and we have started conversations with them as well. They've expressed, potential desire to develop that in the future for potential housing, potential mixed use commercial on there as well. And so we would have to do a land purchase from them. And yeah, they're open to negotiating this aspect.
And then the big
This guy
into Girdwood.
Yep.
So that's on mental health land.
It is.
And then the part to the right where it's all divided into lots, who owns that?
Combination of DOT and private ownership.
There are like 3 or 4 of those that we have been trying to acquire, but the owner died and we've got the lawyers trying to figure out who to work with, right? And HLB owns, I think, 2 of those little.
Yeah, they do.
Little sites, but for the most part, DOT has acquired them already.
Okay. And then the land that is towards Girdwood from the Girdwood Mall, is that all what's been developed in Old Girdwood, or is that more little lines being drawn in there?
Yeah, they're all privately owned existing lots.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think there's also just to the north of the bridge, that would be land which I think is
Forest Service.
Up by the Forest
Service, yeah.
Kyle.
A couple things. With mitigation, deferring costs for mitigation, it is the install of fish culverts an alternative for that? I thought that was maybe a few years ago where you could use mitigation to help pay off mitigation with installing fish culverts.
Let's ask Christy.
Yeah, Christy.
I'm here. This is Christy. We try to keep it in kind. So if we were impacting fish passage, then installing and restoring a stream with an improved fish passage culvert would be an option. Definitely, we're looking at those opportunities to improve habitat within the project area, vicinity, and outwards. But yes.
And one other thing is, as you do go through the design process, all the drainage for Old Town comes out underneath the Seward Highway there. And the drainage was addressed with the last rebuild of the Glacier Creek Bridge. But we would hope that maybe some more attention could be given to there's only one pipe right now. I think it's a 36-inch pipe that goes underneath there. It'd be nice if more pipes were put in to help with the drainage out of Old Town. Old Town is starting to fill in, and so we're seeing a lot of pressure down there. And we're also dealing with our own issues of trying to open up the drainage so it flows better through that area. Mm-hmm. So that's something we would like to see. And then this would be basically like a surcharge construction where you're just loading material with excavation especially in this trumpeter.
We need to do some more very specific exploration there before we know that.
Okay.
It could be potentially both or either.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Oh, and can I just respond that we haven't started on it yet, but we are aware that there are some complex hydraulic issues here.
Good.
So we know that there's going to be a lot of work that goes into that.
Good.
Okay, Tommy, you have your hand up. Again, if you can walk to the front and speak into a microphone.
Sure. My name is Tommy O'Malley, box 598. I might have a unique perspective on this intersection, and that is that at 8 years old, I visited Girdwood with a federal hydrologist whose job was to check the depth of wells. This was about 2 weeks after the 1964 Good Friday earthquake. And so when you see those pictures of the railroad rails kind of bent and the cracks in the road, I stood at the edge of those cracks and I, tried to balance on the rails. And Girdwood town was what do you call that when they said this isn't a town anymore? Destroyed, or it was, the town site was moved in 2 miles because the town site and the area around there wasn't deemed fit for habitation anymore and wasn't safe. The land around here sunk 10 and 12 feet, and that's including the mountains, lost that much in elevation. And even now in Girdwood, when you dig down, old Girdwood, when you dig down about a foot, you reach water. And I just think any time that you build on jelly, hopefully we don't have another earthquake, but we saw that the town was condemned is the word I was looking for. Thank you. When the town was condemned because it was seismically sensitive, and then you build, you build big swooping highways and bridges. Just my perspective is I saw it destroyed before. Anyway, besides being ugly, I wonder if it would, what it would look like with jelly, I don't know. Nature's pretty powerful.
Thanks, Tommy. Anyone else from the room? Oh, I did see, Brianna has your hand up. Go ahead.
I do, thank you. I was wondering if someone could speak to the bike path that is really tiny there on the left side of the highway, kind of right by the forest ranger station, and then how that bike path / pedestrian way would be safely funneling people and dogs and etc. to the mall. And then if you've had conversations with the Forest Service and trails, therefore, that would hopefully be connected someday. And then in lieu of that, I think the plan is to continue the Bird to Gird bike path south. So I know there's so many different groups to speak with, including the railroad, but is that part of a link for the plan?
So we'll preserve, kind of replace what's there with this project with connections for the Bird to Gird path into the mall. It's kind of a steep climb up to Alyeska down from the maintenance station or the railroad. So with that shift of Alyeska, you'll still be on the bridge over the railroad. And then once you get going south toward the roundabout, you'll be going down that kind of loop there, that small loop on the pathway. Kind of a similar design there would be that new project that the DOT, that actually Arnim did too, by Indian Creek over in Indian Mile, what is it, 104 or so. It's kind of the same kind of grade, same kind of width, look and feel. It'll be the same kind of, it'll be a similar design. So you'll be going down that little loop there and then in a tunnel underneath Alyeska highway and then into Old Girdwood and then the mall.
I'll take the second part of that question. We have been talking with the Forest Service. In fact, we're talking about trying to put some kind of partnership together whereby they can connect the Iditarod Trail, which they're telling me comes down to what would be your upper right-hand corner of this drawing. And they're kind of stuck there because their idea is to connect to the Bird to Gird, but they can't do it with the existing railroad bridge there because it's too small, it's too tight up against the railroad. There's no room, right? So when they discovered we're thinking of replacing that bridge, which would be with a larger bridge, they said, hey, let's sit down with the railroad and see if we can get some kind of an agreement for those two trails to connect through there. This is, again, one of those things that we can't do with our FHWA money, but the Forest Service feels fairly confident they could get some kind of grant or flat funding or something to maybe do that, in which case we could incorporate it into our project.
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
It's similar in that there are bikes in my question. I asked it at the open house, but if bikers are on the highway and they're heading south, is there going to be a way that is as safe as riding on the highway for both directions, coming in and out of Girdwood, or just bypassing Girdwood altogether?
We are going to do our best to make that as safe as possible. My understanding is, and I could be wrong, that on the Anchorage side of this intersection, it's not currently legal to ride on the shoulder because there's the path.
No,
available. Am I wrong?
Well, they do it.
Well, I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Well,
And
it's yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but people do it.
And certainly from the intersections south, it is legal, right? So we need to figure out a way to make that work. And we just haven't gotten into the weeds on how to make that work. Even the drawings that we have here for where the path might go are conceptual. We wanted to put in something to kind of make it clear that we know we need to replace the path that we're taking out. We're still in the brainstorming phase and would appreciate any kind of input people have on what would be the best way to do that.
And Brianna, I would add to that as well. You know, people who are riding on the shoulder of the existing Seward Highway would theoretically be able to do the same with this alternative. They would choose, I don't ride the Seward Highway. I'm not confident enough of a cyclist to do that. But the assumption would be that they would likely stay on the shoulder, take the off ramp as if you were going to Girdwood, and potentially use that bypass route to continue south if you did not want to go into Girdwood. Otherwise, you do have shoulders that don't have any left turning conflict to get up into Girdwood. And then ideally, if you wanted to go straight through the roundabout instead of going down into Old Town or the mall, you would basically take the position of a vehicle to go straight through that roundabout. But we're not encouraging that.
Thank you.
Jennifer, I know you had some follow-up questions.
Yes, actually, related to Brianna's, I did want to give my vote for working with the railroad to make things happen. And I understand that that's not within the scope of the project as it is, but it's very exciting. I just want to give kudos to the idea of finding a way to make that work, because I think that'll go a long way to making Girdwood a little bit happier about this. I guess as a related comment, I would say that I also need to agree with Mike that I don't feel like I've heard things to tell Girdwood to justify that giant loop enough yet. And I wrote down all the reasons. Some of them were more compelling than others. But it sounds like one of the big variables is this business about truck speeds. Anyway, I just want to say that the more we can do for bikes and trails in Girdwood, the more interested they'll be in hearing about the needs of trucks.
Oh, may I respond to that?
Yeah, sure.
I would say the big factor here is not, the biggest factor is not the trucks. It's the left turn movements. The only way that we can completely separate the left turn movements from the highway traffic is with a bridge. And the only way we can get these movements on and off the bridge is either with this loop or with a diamond. So if we were to say we're not going to do a loop, then it follows automatically that we're not going to solve the left turn problem. There are some things we can do without impacting that wetland that could somewhat minimize the problem, but we can't solve it without doing this.
When you say the left turn conflict would not be solved with a diamond, you mean there would still be a left turn conflict at the top of the bridge, the T-junction?
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess
Probably.
I see the diamond as solving the left turn conflicts.
Okay.
I see the diamond and the trumpet and even the tight diamond as essentially solving the left turn conflicts. If we don't have the loop, then we don't have a bridge. If we don't have a bridge, then we have turns at grade. And that's a decision that's not 100% made, but I would say definitely from the design team's perspective, we would lean towards solving the problem, even though granted filling wetlands is a negative.
I'd like to continue this conversation later offline.
All right.
Because I don't completely understand. I see another possibility that isn't being described here.
We'd love to see it.
I know I'm missing something.
Okay.
Like Brad, I'm also an engineer, but a different type of engineer. Did you have another comment, Jennifer?
Yeah, can I just say me too?
Yeah, we are more than happy, to have one-on-one conversations. Please email us, call us. Always accessible through the website as well. Yeah, happy to continue.
I really appreciate the time you're taking to go through this in detail. I just want to check if there's anything we're missing from feedback from the other groups. The only thing I can think of is the maintenance question which came up.
Oh, well, I think that's a good thing to discuss is the frontage road of the Tercero. I mean, DOT's position originally was to turn that over to the service area, which would come directly back to this board to fund and maintain, and would be a big infrastructure piece that would have to come in. The position of the municipality is we would like it preferred to stay with the DOT. It's still currently within their right of way, and it will be built to TOT standards, which could in the long run be a very large maintenance cost for the service area and the taxpayers here.
Would the same argument be true for the road going to Toadstool from the roundabout?
That would stay DOT, I believe, right?
Yes, that's already DOT.
Okay, and Toadstool itself would be DOT.
Between the railroad and the Seward Highway, it's DOT.
Okay.
And otherwise it's,
Got it. Thank you. Okay, I don't think there was anything else that came up I think we've covered everything that came up in previous meetings.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll move on to item number 3, which is kind of more of a discussion amongst the board here about a review letter being prepared by Roads and Utilities and Public Safety. Because I know we had started discussing having a sort of formal statement and response to this design. I just wondered if you could give us an update on where we are. I think Jennifer was looking at this and Public Safety as well. you there, Jennifer?
I am. I was just going to ask Amanda if she wanted to jump in first.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my microphone. I don't know where to go from here. We have a draft letter, and yep.
If I can jump in, my sense is a lot more information was presented tonight. So if you had a draft letter, we'd probably have to rewrite quite a bit of it.
Probably.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if the right thing to do is for you to continue with that after this meeting and bring it back to us next week.
At your regular meeting?
The regular meeting, yes, next Monday.
We can add that to the agenda, maybe around there.
Yeah. Does that work for you both?
Sort of.
That's good. Yeah.
I guess I had an understanding about the will of the board when we agreed to the letter, and I don't have a good feeling about a good way to guess at whether or not that will has changed in any way.
Okay, so we should have that discussion now then. Do you want to start, Jennifer? Where do you stand on the project and the preferred proposal that's presented tonight?
Frankly, more confused than I was going into it.
Any other?
More precisely, I feel like there's more to that. It's not as straightforward an objection or an agreement as I felt going into it, but I'd be curious what other people think.
Brianna?
Yes, thank you. Just to add to that statement, I think we weren't sure at the time whether we needed to have a letter of non-objection or of support, because it wasn't going to be a resolution, but just a letter. But there had been other subcommittees having meetings like police and safety, and their concerns with the fire department and having police as well. And now we know tonight a little bit more about that egress, that toadstool, without specifics, which is understandable, but a lot of things are conceptual. So we could just update the letter with concerns we've heard from our community.
Thank you. Did you want to add? If not, jump in.
No, I think, yeah, I guess, yes. I think the community members that I've talked to have kind of expressed what the environmental impact and the cost of it, and, you know, and do we need it, you know, is that, you know, I don't think anybody wants to say there's never been a fatality, because we don't want to say that. I mean, you know, there could be, and we all use that to get it in and out of Girdwood, and it's hard to take a left there. But from community members I've heard from, it seems like weighing the impacts and the size of it and the cost and everything is it's just too much. But that's I don't know if our letter needs to say that, or I mean, you know, I don't know where we stand on that, but that's kind of what I've gotten from the people I've talked to anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say something very similar. I think while I appreciate a lot of the details of the design, I think the design as it stands is completely out of proportion to the problem it's trying to solve, both in terms of the scale of the intersection, the impact on both viewshed and definitely wetlands, and this huge piece of infrastructure at the sort of entrance to Girdwood Valley kind of, you know, moves away from what Girdwood's actually about, which is the environment, not so much large pieces of built infrastructure. I think there are other designs that are somewhat close, which could be more palatable, but the one at the moment, I don't think I can personally support. But You know, and I'd be happy whether we do it as a letter or whether we do it as a resolution. I think either of those work from a practical point of view. But we need to, my sense is we need to go away and discuss this again next week, because we do have that meeting, the regular meeting next week. And one question for the project team is there a time scale? Do you want a response from us? I mean, if the response is negative, maybe you don't want it at all. Would you like, do you need something formal soon? Is there an actual deadline that we're working towards?
We are ideally going back to the Planning and Zoning Commission with our draft DSR document, and we're hoping for a public hearing in November.
Okay.
December, I apologize, yep, that.
Right.
Back.
It's not a public hearing.
Yeah, it's not a public hearing. Planning and zoning could choose to do that. Yeah, informational only as part of the CSS process. It would go before Urban Design Commission as, you know, the project continues, but.
That'd be a later point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, can I just add to that?
Yeah, please.
We do have to submit an application, but you will get a copy once we submit it, and they'll get it or get routed to
you don't need to have our response.
Yeah, and then you could send the letter directly to the planning department.
Okay.
It would be nice if we knew where.
Oh, right.
I think you
Absolutely.
get the sense now.
Yeah.
So I think schedule-wise, then we can discuss it at our meeting next week, and then as long as we have something to produce by the following month, by late October, that would work in terms of timescale. Okay. Jennifer.
Sorry, Mike, I just had one point of clarification about that. Are you saying that we don't need the letter or the draft letter for the next meeting? We'll discuss it at the next meeting and come up with a letter after that. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes. We do not need it. Well, if we have one, we can discuss the draft itself, but I think we can discuss where we would be, draft something and then vote on it for October.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable with that. Okay, thanks.
Brianna?
Thank you. I would like to move that we discuss this at our next meeting, if that helps. And also wanted to thank everyone for the proposal and could summarize thoughts here or at the next meeting.
I think that also gives us time to potentially follow up on some specific questions. So I think that schedule works better. Okay, thank you. I don't think we need to formally make a motion to incorporate in the next agenda. It'll just be in there. Okay, thank you. So I think we're actually done with the DOT. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. I look forward to some more conversations.
Absolutely.
This is the right answer.
Be careful. Hope nobody is traveling south.
Said that.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move straight on to item number 4, which is the review letter being prepared by the Holt Hills Housing Advisory Committee. Do we have Emma?
Okay.
Like the tractor.
We let Sam travel back because he had some things come up.
Okay.
Okay, so there was a Holt Hills Housing Advisory Committee meeting earlier today at 4 o'clock. My understanding is they have a letter framework finalized, which they'd like to present to us. And I think there were some other questions as well. I will hand it over to you, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So Sam, my fellow co-chair, was here, but he did step out because he has to travel back in the dark on his bike. Basically, just to summarize what we did today in the meeting, we knew that we needed to review the draft letter, but we sort of began by discussing the way we wanted, who we would like to present it in our meeting on the 21st. And in addition to who, sort of understanding the purpose we've been giving and wanting to clarify that with GBOS. And so as far as we'd understood it as a committee, we felt we were given the task of consolidating concerns, coming up with some specific asks regarding the development agreement, And along with that, being a facilitator, knowing that we don't have the power to negotiate, we wanted to, and we feel that we have up until this point done a good job bringing the community's concerns forth and continuing to represent the community. And so having a letter and bringing this letter at this point, we are hoping that we can have Girdwood Board of Supervisors accept or reject it as is, feeling that we've done due diligence in the drafting process to this point. So with that in mind, we chose the two co-chairs, myself and Sam, with an alternate of Brooke Lavender, to present on the 21st, which that date may be changed to be earlier, with the goal of then bringing those, the negotiation isn't the right term, but after our presentation, bringing the notes back to our committee and having a discussion of how we feel, of what they've accepted or what they've rejected and how that's gone. So there's a little bit of fluidity to that timing, but the goal is to have just two of us at this table to present. Following that, we bring it back to tell the committee, and on the 22nd, as we understand it with HLB, there's a meeting that could potentially dispose the land, or at least it's definitely discussing the land disposal. And at that date, we've chosen Dave Hamry, a member of our committee, to summarize how the presentation/negotiation went. And the only other thing that we did make a plan to do was to set dates for possible future Holton Hill Housing Advisory Committee meetings, knowing that this process will not necessarily be done on the 21st. Is there anything you want to add, Brooke? Okay, and I know Mike was present, and so if there's anything you think I've missed that's significant, feel free to.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously
the specific drafts to the letter.
Yeah, and the context of this is obviously a little changed since this morning's announcement. So the Adam Trombley is now Chief of Staff for their Bronson, is no longer Director of the Office of Economic and Community Development. We do not know, at least as of a few hours ago, we didn't know what that meant in terms of who was the leading HLB. It may still be Adam going forwards. It may not be. I don't know. Did we get any further clarification, Kyle, or are we still?
No, we don't. But the preference of the new Director of Community Development, which HLB is under, is for Adam Trombley to stay with this project, as he's been involved since the development of the project. So, but that has not been confirmed. Even the developer, Connie Oshimura, was caught by surprise with this change and is in the dark as to who is leading HLB related to this project. So we will probably know more as the week goes on.
Yeah. So by the end of the week, we should know for certain, yes, who is leading HLB next week. And again, the context here is that what I think the advisory committee is recommending to us is that there are some changes in the development agreement, and the development agreement is between HLB and the developer CY Investments. So we're not a party to that agreement at all. So what we're doing is basically asking HLB, or telling HLB what we want in there in order to receive the support of the community. So that the negotiation of that actual document is not our job, not our responsibility, but we're presenting the information to HLB for them to do the negotiation. There are some things we're asking which are not directly tied to the development agreement, but would be between HLB and some other entity. There are ways in which we could perhaps do a memorandum of understanding or something between GBOS or something else, something to deal with anything else in the document that's in the set of requirements that we need, which is not directly tied to the development. So I think that's why we're saying this isn't a negotiation that GBOS is doing or a negotiation that the advisory committee is doing. It's really just presenting what we think is needed in order for it to be acceptable to the community. So the draft I think you passed earlier today was very, very similar to the one that came out of our joint meeting last week.
Yep.
Except the introduction was shortened. Would it be possible for someone just to go through and explain how it's different from the outcome at the end of the last meeting?
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking about version 7 as opposed to version 6. Version 7 is the one that we have up here that we voted to choose as our draft letter. And the additions came after conversation in our last meeting. Margaret helped get some hard numbers. And in the introduction, we just added the realities of what the business owners were saying and keeping it along the lines of the RFP. I can't say exactly what it's some minor changes that I think help make it effective, although just a little bit longer. And we just really felt like the essence of what we were trying to do was in both of these drafts. And so choosing this draft and wanting to stick with it, we feel confident in that. The only 2 changes we made today was to make sure it was to Adam Trombley. And then on the second page, we added language that said increase transparency prior to land disposal. So just prior to land disposal was added. And so that may not exactly explain the difference between the last draft and this one, but there wasn't much of a difference, just a little data.
Would you be able to go back to version 6? And we're just looking for the introduction.
Right.
Meeting package for this meeting.
Okay, yeah, let me just pull it up. I have to go to.
I just want to make sure that everyone on the board is comfortable with the difference between version 6, which is basically what we drafted in our last joint meeting, or our last meeting with HHAC.
Here's version 6.
So version 6 has the one we came up with last time has a little bit more detail about the history, how we got here. I think the second paragraph was removed from, it's no longer in draft 7.
Yep, following the HLB CUI.
So, yeah, that paragraph actually never made it in. That was the one that I offered to draft at the meeting. This paragraph was never actually.
So that was never actually something we accepted, okay.
And when I wrote it, what I found and what I sent over to Nico when I gave him my product was that it changed the flavor of the message significantly, and I wasn't comfortable reading it that way.
So I think that was the language which the board suggested could be added, and then when you did add it, it broke the flow of the letter. So
it put it very backward looking.
Yeah.
I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you guys can take a look and see what you think, but I really took to heart what I had heard from Randy Solt about focusing forward. And I thought that the backward focus really wasn't taking us there. And so early in the letter was a mistake.
I believe there was another change later on in the introduction. Is that?
Yeah, so here's so this is the letter here, this is the letter they proposed, and I think there were some changes down here in addition to community-led meetings.
I think it helped clarify it with the bullet points or the ABCD under goals.
Correct. So the goals became in here, which just was more clear about what we were trying to get to.
Yep, and
what the committee was trying to get to.
And the previous paragraph was controlled.
We combined them.
So I think it's substantially the same as what we agreed to last meeting. Correct. So I would entertain a motion to keep this group draft 7 as a statement of the community, a summary of the concerns and suggestions for recommendations for change.
So moved. This is Brianna.
Thanks, Brianna. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Are there any further questions from the board? Anything else from the community?
I just have a comment. Thank you, all you guys. And can't read it, and I should have been at the meeting today, but I trusted that you've heard enough of this and you know what to put in there. And so I totally trust You guys, you know, so thanks, I appreciate that. And I guess just on the letter, yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. And whatever we didn't get in the letter, you know, is in our talking points and such, and so to speak.
When you go to me, yeah, good, because yeah, that's, yeah.
Just real quick, so Jennifer says she lost audio. Can people hear us out there?
I can hear you. I can try my phone still and see if it works.
Okay, yeah, she may be having audio issues on her side, so.
Yeah, I still have you on the phone.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Jennifer, can you hear us?
Is she on still?
It's clearly not too, it's not working too. Sleep. No, it's good.
Right?
Oh, she got, oh, trying to get back on.
Yeah, not showing her.
Okay. When she rejoins, we'll see if she has any further questions.
I do have a question, not directly towards that. I made a note. So this meeting on the 21st, who exactly, do you know who, because everything's changed, we don't know who we're meeting, right?
We know Connie is gonna meet with us.
She will.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
that's, yeah.
And it'll be in front of HOB or, somebody.
A representative from HLE, if we can get one of them.
I do know that there's going to be a staff member there, Emma, but Emma's not so well briefed in this. She has not been directly involved, and really I think the requests that are here from the committee are director level. So, so Emma said she would be there, but she recognizes it too, that she can't make these decisions. It's at the
I
director.
know, yeah, the negotiations, I think this is a presentation, right? I mean, you're not gonna get down there. You're doing this, you're doing this. So it's gonna, I think Sam and Emma and Brooke, right?
We had to be clear on the number of us that was allowed. And so we chose an alternate that maybe by some chance we'll be able to go all three, but for the most part, it's two of us, which would be me and Sam.
Co-chairs.
Yeah.
I got you. Just, I would, flip a coin for, you're probably gonna do this, but it's, or maybe even bring an extra person to take notes. That's always nice to have after those kind of meetings, so might be good to
Can like
drag
a
some,
community member come to take notes?
drag somebody.
Can I go as take notes or do I not because I'm on the board?
No, minutes are, anybody can take minutes. I mean, it's.
Well, we have an Open Meetings Act thing that we're trying to not violate here, so that's why the two board members are going, but somebody like Betsy could go.
Only it's at 11:30. So I already have to get up.
Just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really important
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
You could record it too.
But
Do you think if we ask permission, we can do that?
Just for your notes.
I think
I think Jennifer said she's trying to reconnect, so if we need to, we can move to a vote if that's what we're just.
I think we should move to a vote. People are comfortable. So again, we had I believe we do have a motion.
Yeah.
And a second.
Yep.
Yes. So let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Guy Wade,
yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
motion passes 4-0.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
The other thing that came up was a question about what happens going forward and the purpose of the so was there something specific you wanted clarification on that we can provide?
I think that we just hadn't given it time to speak about as a committee. I think that we were getting all of a sudden to this finish line, realizing, wait, we're not going to negotiate anything. What is our purpose? But I think that since you all are so supportive of what we've done, then the most important thing is we're on the same page. And we all are aware of what we can and can't do. And so, no, I think that I think we're clear on our mission.
Yeah, I think there was clarification needed on the process moving forward after say the October HLB meeting.
Right.
And the disposal of the land, and if we were if the needs that we asked for weren't met, what our next steps would be, I guess, because that's looking pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something we will,
Yeah.
when we see how, we'll cross that.
Yeah.
We'll cross that bridge when we
Hit that swoop when we get to it.
Yeah. Swoops.
So I think the other thing, I don't know if we've had this conversation, the other thing we need to discuss is the, currently the HLB Advisory Committee, or Commission, sorry, has a meeting on the 22nd. And one of the items on that meeting is to potentially act on the disposal of the land for Holden Hills. And are you back with us, Jennifer?
I'm sorry, just now back on.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I just saw you join, but so we did vote to approve the letter, the framework letter, which is substantially the same as the one we discussed last week. It's just some of the suggestions we made that lot work mechanically. So basically the same letter as we approved last time, or we agreed on last time, but we just voted on. So the meeting, the HLB Advisory Committee meeting on the 22nd, it does have an agenda item for disposal of the land. Our understanding is that the HLB staff will recommend that no action is taken at that meeting on the 22nd, and it's potentially acted on in October, so it'll be towards the end of October. Commissioners may choose to ignore that advice and act on it anyway. So the recommendation is that, and we also don't know if the public hearing will be extended or closed. So if you have any comments on it, there will be a public hearing in front of HLB Advisory Committee on 11:30 till 1 o'clock or till 1:30 next Thursday. It is available online or at the Permit Centre in Anchorage. It is likely that there won't be an action, and there may be opportunity to talk again the following month, but we don't know that. Yeah, do you have a question, Lisa?
Yeah, I have a question because Imagine Girdwood got the money to finish the Girdwood area plan. And that is so exciting and wonderful. And I would hope that that should change everything because we're really not supposed to do anything until that's completed. And we've got all this development going on. We have got every single one of our wetlands right now in that wetlands bank spoken for with all of the things that are going on right now. Can't we have the Girdwood area plan and look at the big picture and have that done before all of these entities come to develop in Girdwood? And can't we ask for that now that we're so close?
Yeah, we could absolutely ask for that. I don't think it's going to be listened to, but I think it's absolutely.
And it's one of our talking points.
Because
that is how it's supposed to.
That's how it's supposed to work.
What happens is the plan that's the plan that's been adopted is the one that actually has impact because it's been adopted, and we will not have an adopted plan until probably next summer at the earliest, probably summer fall next year. We hope to have something. I'm speaking with my other hat on. We hope to have something by spring that can go through the municipal process. But then some of the things that will follow on from that, such as code changes and things like that, will be after that even. But I agree. I mean, it would be much better if we could have got through the area plan first and a more holistic approach. This whole development, we're just stuck in a place where that isn't the case. But I agree, we can absolutely.
We really should. Yeah. This whole valley is getting impacted with things.
Yeah,
well, at least now we know that there is that funding, whereas before it was still sort of an if we could. So.
We have a schedule.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board or the public? Okay. In that case, again, thank you very much for all the work. To the volunteers who aren't even on the committee, like Brooks and
Crystal's got her hand up.
Yep.
And I should also say thank you so much to Nico for all the subscribing.
Yes, definitely.
Crystal.
I just wanted to, I guess I wanted some clarification because the way that I read the agenda item for the HLB meeting is that you are required to sign up in advance the day prior by 5 p.m. in order to testify on that agenda item. Am I understanding that properly?
That's not my understanding.
For online.
I think, my understanding is that's for online only.
When you
Not if you're in person, but I mean, I don't think it would hurt to do both.
So I think if I recall last HLB meeting, there was people that were there in person to testify on an item, and they were rejected to testify because they were not signed up in advance.
I don't recall that. That may have happened. I don't remember that.
We'll seek clarification and try to put it into the minutes on that. But I know I haven't been to an in-person meeting in 2 years. And when we used to go, you'd walk in the room and you would sign a sheet right there, and then they would call upon you during that item. But you couldn't raise your hand if you had to sign the sheet. So that's how they kept order in the room. So that may be the case. So we'll ask to see what the clarification is.
Okay, and then just one more final point is that if in fact we are required to sign up in advance, even when we're there in person, one of the issues is going to.
Oops, can you still hear me? I just lost my.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. So you will have to. Oh, so we won't know how the basically the presentation from the Holton Hills Housing Advisory Committee is going to kind of end. Kind of the result of that is if like we're getting traction and the negotiations going well, or if that's not going well and we're not going to get any of those requested items until after the deadline to sign up. Does that make sense? Because the Holton Hills Housing Advisory Committee negotiation meeting starts at 4 o'clock, and we're not going to know how that's going to go until, there's only an hour between that meeting and when the deadline would occur. So I guess getting some really clear communication on the requirement to sign up in advance would be helpful.
I would recommend at this time, sign up in advance.
Yeah.
But we will
If you're not there, they'll just skip over you.
But we will see clarification.
We will see clarification, but just if you want to be careful, just sign up in advance.
Brianna.
Thank you. This isn't really necessary, but I think everything you've said, Kyle, and everyone would be great because I was on the last call and it was confusing for the brand new people in the room for their hopeful testimony. So thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I think we've done that item, and I would call for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, she made, Brianna, it sounds like Brianna made the motion. She needs.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
So everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you. Good to see your bubbles.